Hello there. I am Martin Cross. This is Cross's Corner, and I'm absolutely chuffed today. I've got one of my really great friends, and it is Matt Brittin, who is in Cross's Corner today. Hi, Matt.
Martin, it's fantastic. It's a real privilege to be here. How are you?
Yeah, I'm all right today. I've had fun at school, where obviously we met all those years ago for the first time. Still there for my sins, but still loving it and enjoying it. What has your day been like today, Matt?
Well, I'm in my office in central London. I work at Google, and I've been doing some normal work things. I've actually just announced I'm stepping down. We've just appointed my successor, so I've been helping her to get up and running. I went to a lunch meeting, which was fascinating because today's the US inauguration. So lots of things concerning business leaders and policymakers, which is the group were around the table. In terms of uncertainty, what the US government's going to do, the ceasefire, will it hold, the role of technology and Elon Musk. So that's the kind of stuff that's swirling around at the moment.
So has your job been like a very high level job? I know your official title is president, or has been president of Europe, Middle East and Africa. I don't really know what you do, or what you did.
A lot of people say that to me. So I've been at Google for 18 years, and it's been a very fast growth. So when I started, like only 20% of people were online, and now around the world, and now over 70%. And we've gone from dial-up to smartphone. So what I've done has changed a lot over the time. But I suppose in recent years, it's been about helping our product people make amazing products and then land them in my case in a lot of different countries with different legal systems and cultural contexts and so on. And then also to try to increasingly explain ourselves to policymakers. What's the technology able to do actually? How do you harness it for good? What are the risks? So lots of those things are really top of the agenda at the moment because AI is taking off big time and all of the things we just mentioned.
I'm sure we're going to talk about that stuff and stuff you did at Google. You mentioned that you've made the decision to step back. How much is this time an inflection point in your life for you?
It's an interesting one. I've got a pile of books at home that my wife Kate calls my midlife crisis reading list. But I suppose I'm in my mid-50s, and it is a moment to reflect, isn't it? At that stage, my kids are just kind of starting to find their way in the world. And I've been in the job that I have now, looking after Google in EMEA for 10 years, exactly when I announced my decision to step down. And so it was partly that. There's so much interesting to do. I could keep going. But you know what? Actually, it really reminded me of the decision that I made to stop trying to compete at the top of rowing. And it's one of those things that you realize after a while you've already made the decision because you're contemplating it. And the very fact you're contemplating it sort of means that you've moved to a different level of engagement with the role. And I also wanted to step down at a time when people said, oh no, he's done an amazing job, not when's he going to go. So those were factors.
Yeah. Is it generally thought then? Yeah, I know the answer to this is yes, but I kind of want a little bit of why, I guess I'll ask it. Is it generally thought that you've done a great job at Google then?
I mean, it would be not right to be anything other than humble about it, but I feel like that the things I've enjoyed doing, like building people and teams, building relationships. I mean, unquestionably, we've built a really successful business. But I hope also in my job, I've tried to help the people building the products understand the richness of cultures in Europe in particular, and in Africa. I've just been in Africa a couple of months ago looking at how technology totally changes lives. So I feel like hopefully I played a role in helping the company build products really for everyone in all those different countries, and not just think with a sort of Californian sort of mindset about stuff. So I hope so.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. You kind of aligned it with your decision to step out of international rowing. So just run that by me, because we'll talk about your rowing. But this was 1990. So 1989, you famously won a bronze medal as part of a young British eight that had a lot of I guess, star names in. And I mean, on the one hand, you know, maybe you do say that, you know, if I said what's your best result, you might come back and say that. So why is that a moment where you chose to step back?
Well, actually, so we won this medal, and it was a bunch of, you know, 4 of the guys in the crew I was at school with, a bunch of ex-juniors, all people I knew and really trusted, and we sort of won kind of against the odds a bronze medal, actually behind Germany and Germany. We should have waited another year and we'd have still silver. But I think I had the growing realization, a couple of things. One, I've just been at university and I was trying to be a full-time athlete and work, and it was really, really hard. I think we had a £6,000 Sports Aid Foundation grant, which was really helpful, but it couldn't fund you. And so I found it really hard. And then, to be honest, the realization I had was that I wasn't going to be the Olympic gold medalist like you, or like Johnny Searle, or like Tim Foster, who were both in that 8. That I was probably going to be, if I was lucky, you know, on the edge of the 8 and maybe get the occasional bronze. And I felt that the sacrifice for me was too much. So I had to be really honest about my performance. And I was always one of those, I was kind of, you know, on the edge of, but not in the kind of top category at any point really in the national team, at least. And so I was honest with myself. And at Google, I feel like I'm doing well, but, you know, I'm not Demis Hassabis, the guy who is winning the Nobel Prize for breakthroughs in computer science and biology by any means. And so I'm clear about what I contribute, and I'm clear that I've built some successors who hopefully take things on in a better way than I could. And that's what feels similar, Martin.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I guess obviously one of the attributes in terms of, you know, having a successful life, particularly in business, is the ability to look at things and say what is the sense, what's reality here, and then take maybe challenging decisions. Although as you said, you're already thinking about it. I'm playing devil's advocate and essentially going, well, actually, you were better than that, and if you're working the whole time, you know, you're not quite, but you know, with one hand behind your back. I'm just wondering how much stuff in your career, I don't know, like you know, the boat race, 3 silver medals in the boat race might have gone in for how accurate your perception was of your own abilities.
I think I mean, if I look back and I compare myself with people I thought were about my level, I won't name names, I think I was probably right in my perception. I think there's a couple of what ifs for all of us, right? And if anybody watching who's an older rower, the number of times you get together with friends and talk about, you know, how good you used to be and what might have been, we do it often, Martin. And
yes.
And so I think if there'd been a system that was a bit stronger around us, you know, I felt like we won that medal in '89, and then we're told, you know, go away, and we're not going to give you any help, and you have to come in and prove yourself again this time next year. There wasn't a system at all, really, to kind of develop the talent. There wasn't the funding for coaching. There wasn't the ability, therefore, to kind of have a multi-year strategy. So as I was thinking about this conversation with you, I was thinking about how much I've taken from rowing into the world of work, but also what I'd take back from the world of work to the world of rowing. Like my life in the last 18 years has been bringing people together, building a system that doesn't rely on any one person, a system that can really deliver performance. And of course, you know, that's what we've seen British rowing in particular go on to be able to achieve.
Yeah. One of my colleagues in the history department, I will name him, Andy Lawrence, who you might get to be top guy. But I said I'm talking to Matt, and he said, "Oh, how does he view his success in rowing relative to his success in business?" And I wondered whether that was a fair question. But I thought, well, I'll ask him what his perspective is on it.
Wow, I've not really thought about that. I mean, I suppose. In some ways, I suppose the business role has touched so many people's lives. I think it's, you know, it's made a much bigger contribution. Now, people might criticize tech companies, and I won't go into, this is not an interview about my work, but I feel like, you know, I run a business that operates in so many different countries. We have billions of users. I personally was behind a couple of programs, one of which has gone on to train tens of millions of people in digital skill. So the kind of impact on the world, unquestionably, huge. But for me, rowing was a sort of character-defining experience at a time when, you know, my character was being cooked just like yours. All the stuff you did as a schoolboy and then a young man in the British rowing team, these shape us. And I think that every day in the work environment, I'm drawing on what I learned from rowing even now.
So, right, I'm going to go back to rowing as opposed to something else. You know, I know you've been thinking about what we might talk about in and chat, and you positioned yourself as someone who wasn't good at ball sports, which might be a typical rower. So I'm going back to kind of when you started. So what were you like, and what did you take from early days in rowing?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, my dad, fantastic. He's 91 and still going. My mum, 90. Hello to both of you.
Wow.
Were both fantastic ball sport players. My dad had trial for Arsenal and Chelsea. My mum was a county netball player, and they, you know, they were fantastic parents and still are. They did laugh at me when I tried to throw or catch a ball. And then, you know, when I would run in running races, I just didn't have it. And actually, so much sport at school is about running and ball sport. And you know, when I finally got the chance to do something else, which sounded like skiving off and go down to the river, I jumped at the chance. And then when you get in a boat, everybody's rubbish, which is brilliant. So, because everybody has to be kind of taught the basics, and they teach you exactly how to move. And I remember, you know, Mike Spracklin would always say, just repeat the motion perfectly 200 times and you'll win an Olympic gold medal. So actually, as we all got more coordinated, I started to find myself not at the bottom of the list. I was always the last guy to be picked when they do those lineups, you know, for football teams. You know, I found myself in the middle of the pack, and then as I started to get actually fitter, I started to find myself at the top of the pack. So that's how rowing found me. And then I remember, so you know, people don't know, but you were a very young teacher when I was at school, and it was a former grammar school that just became an independent school. And you know, you turn up at assembly with your LA gold medal and tell us the story, and suddenly the Olympian is also a real person. And I know that you've had that effect, and many of our other successful Olympians and world medalists have had that effect on other people. But then what happened was one day we were short of somebody down at the river, and they put me in a pair with you when I was 16. And you sat behind me and just yelled at me the whole time. And I suddenly realized there was a whole another level, and we beat the record time that any pair had ever done by a long way, and so on and so forth. And so I think for me, rowing was a journey of sort of seeing all the time that there was another level. And then you kind of are successful at school and you go to the international races and you suddenly find, oh, there's a whole other level. And then you're successful as a junior, you become a senior, there's a whole other level. So I think that's the journey that I went on with rowing.
So thinking about success at school, you know, it's been done like a few times since, obviously, but the triple, winning the Schools Head National Schools and the Princess Elizabeth Cup at Henley, like how come you guys did that triple, not just once but twice, and what did that do for you in terms of, you know, this person who was developing?
I think everything, and you kind of alluded to asking what's my sort of strongest rowing achievement, and actually I think probably it was that. And because this is 1985, I was at Hampton Grammar School, or independent school by then. It had a bit, you know, fairly mixed success, some successes in the past, and we had a ragtag bunch of people. So I was in the first 8 when I was 15 in the sort of 5th form, and it was pretty poor. And then the next year, all of the upper 6th, all the older guys had left, and we put together this 8, which was lower 6th form, so the second to highest year, and 2 5th formers, and absolutely no chance of winning anything. But with Steve Gunn, who obviously you and I know incredibly well, who built incredible teams over subsequent years, we were winning. And we were winning because we were training as hard as the senior squad, national squad guys, and we were rowing well and we were racing all the time. And so that collection of sort of real, on paper, who would bet on us, we just dominated through the year. And then the second year, we had exactly the same crew, bar the Cox, and in exactly the same order. and we went on and did the whole thing yet again. So what did that give you? Incredible sort of confidence, but also confidence that can only come from the way you combine with other people. And also for me, also I think it gave me this obsession with kind of building systems and architecture performance is something I've been fascinated by subsequently, both in sport and in later life.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It was quite remarkable, and it obviously put Hampton's name at the very top of junior rowing. You also got international representation, so as part of a British four. What about that for you?
I think, pulling on the, as you know, and others watching will know, pulling on the British vest is a special thing anytime you get to compete. And I was selected, and with my pairs partner Johnny Holes, we did a 4, and we had a hope of a gold. It would have been the first junior gold, and the Coxless 4, obviously a category that Britain's done pretty well in over the years, as you pioneered, and we got a silver. So it was disappointing, but also like a world silver medal in, as a 2-year junior in your first year was a bit of a wow moment. And then the next year there was a chance of doing like an even faster 4, and the team decided to sort of bet on a pair, a Holes and Singfield pair, and then another Coxless 4 with myself and Jim Walker and Johnny Searle amongst others, and we got a silver again. So I think those were also kind of, at the time it was the high watermark of junior rowing, and then of course broke down the barriers, and we saw subsequently gold medals in those boats in years to come. There's been a lot of people building on each other's shoulders, just like we were able to build on your shoulders, but that junior system really started then to roll.
You mentioned a few names that some people will be familiar with watching that. One of them's Johnny Searle, who you're still involved with now. I know that you rowed with him back at school. You competed with him in the World Championships. You raced against him in the boat race. So I'm going to ask you to talk a bit about Johnny and what you know about him that you can share. And also, you mentioned another one, John Hulls, aka Jobsworth, that some people might know about him, who was sort of a legend in his own lifetime in terms of rowing. Maybe you can talk about those two guys.
Well, look, I mean, I think you get to know people really well, don't you, when you're competing in boats with them, and particularly that sort of school period is such an intense period of personal growth as well. So Johnny Searle, is like a brother to me, except I'm not as successful as Greg, which is disappointing. But we really did grow up together, and racing against him in the boat race, there was this incredible sort of, I would say, sort of destructive, we can come on to the boat race, but, destructive atmosphere and culture around Oxford and Cambridge and how much they hated each other, which Johnny and I found comical, because I think we were both capable of, racing at our best and hardest against each other and still being good friends and having that sort of respect and affection. So I guess the thing that's stuck out for me with Johnny, like all of us, he's got incredible strengths, but his strengths, I think, particular around self-belief, were kind of off the charts, and it can make him quite irritating because he's got a really strong point of view, but his ability to believe what we could do really lifted people. And I think I particularly think about when he went into the pair with Greg, believing that they could become the pair, believing that they could win an Olympic gold medal. He as you know, used to say, I'm going to win an Olympic gold medal with my brother. And your eyes would roll because he, was a stick insect at 15, and there was no sign that he was going to be able to do that. But he always had that sort of athletic timing in the boat. He's got a great feel for the boat, and even now he's still fascinated by rowing. He's coaching. We row together when we're able. He's always thinking, always trying to find new ways of going faster and helping other people to do the same. So I think he's got incredible drive and self-belief.
Yeah. And what about Jobsworth?
Well, Johnny Hulls, a different kind of character, but again, that's the joy of rowing, isn't it? To get to row with all these people. And, the two Johnnies and I rowed together in that Hampton 8, winning everything a couple of times, and also in that GB8 where we won that bronze. And he was an incredible boat mover. We all know people like this. They're sort of on paper you wouldn't think that, but he was an incredible boat mover, an incredible racer, but he didn't like to, let's say, he didn't like to waste effort, did he?
No.
And so the classic thing with Johnny would be, the program would be whatever, 8 500s at race pace, and he'd say, well, why don't we just do one really good one?
Yeah.
And there's something in that, isn't there? But you could never go to the calf too soon with Jobsworth. But like I said, I had some of my best rows with him when we trialled for the juniors. We were kind of way ahead of everybody else. We used to be putting a Cox pair against Coxless pairs all the time to kind of make it fairer for everybody, and it was entirely down to his boat moving talents, as I could find out when I later went with other people.
Yeah. Do I remember it right that when you left school, you were obviously at Cambridge, and you were, in as a fresher, you were going to be in the Cambridge 8, and there was an article or picture about you in the Daily Mirror. Have I got that right?
You have, yeah. So one of the gifts rowing gave to me was I wanted to get better at rowing. I haven't been so successful at school. The only places you could go at the time were sort of Oxford or Cambridge, or UL would argue UL too. And so I managed to get into Cambridge. And my first boat race, I was the youngest person in the race. I think the youngest person ever to race the race. So the press are looking for a story, and so they do a profile. I went straight from school to university, and I was young for my year of 1st of September baby. So the press is looking for some story. So they alight on me. They come and do an interview, and they take some photographs, and I think it's gone well. And the next day, I'm out there as page 7 fella in the Mirror, which is a thing. Younger viewers won't know what a newspaper is, but it's it was a thing that they used to have in order to balance out the other kinds of feature pages they had. So that was quite embarrassing, but not as embarrassing as when I then discovered that one of the teachers at my former school had photocopied the page and stuck it all around the school. I don't know who. I never found out which teacher that was. But yeah, that was my first brush with the
yeah. I was just going to ask you there that there is this thing that kids who are born towards the youngest bit of the year, so the youngest kids, don't do as well academically or anything else. Like there's a study about hockey players and things. Your story seems to break that trend.
Yeah, well, actually, Johnny Holes and I had birthdays within about 3 days of each other, and we were both really young for our years, and we went on, at least in the rowing world, to be at the top end of the country in terms of performance then. I don't know. I think, genuine. I think the rowing gave me everything, because if it wasn't for the rowing, I wouldn't have been determined to try to get a place, and go on to Cambridge. So I think that's where my drive on the academic side came from. And actually, I think it was. I just treated it like another rowing goal. I need to win the triple, or I need to win the Princess Elizabeth Cup, or whatever it is. What do I need to do to get that done? How am I going to fit it in?
So when you look back now on the whole True Blue boat race, and you might like to explain to people who might not know what that is. What are your thoughts? What do you feel about it? How long did it take you to process what happened? That sort of thing.
This is all ancient history, but I go straight from school where we've won everything twice, 2 years running with the same crew. I've got 2 silver medals from the Junior Worlds, and I arrive at Cambridge, and Cambridge have won the previous year's boat race. And I'm lucky enough to be successful at the top end of the squad, and we put together a crew, and it's going really well all the way up to Christmas. I'm stroking the boat. I'm loving it. It's fantastic. It's a brutal system. I don't think it's as good a system as at Hampton in terms of teaching us to move the boat well, but we had some horsepower. And we go towards the boat race, and famously, this is the year when Dan Topolsky had managed to entice some fantastic, ex-Olympians to come to Oxford, having done the Olympics and sort of on the tail end of their career. So the exact opposite of me. And actually, that year, I was the youngest athlete in the race, and Donald MacDonald, the Oxford president, was the oldest ever athlete in the race. And indeed, he was until James Cracknell came in a few years back. So we had the youngest and the oldest athletes, and there was this huge rebellion in Oxford between the incoming experienced athletes and Dan Topolsky, who'd run the race many times, the coach. And long story short, and you can read the story, there was a big falling out, and they raced with a much depleted crew, not all the talent that they had on their books, and it was all happening in the last minute. What happened on the day was it was I think described as Wagnerian conditions. The thunders, the heavens opened. It was very dramatic. There was lightning. It was incredibly rough, and we go off the start. And we have a good start, but then we hit incredibly rough water. And Cambridge, we just plough down the middle. And Oxford go off to the Fulham Wall, under the shelter of the wall, which is normally would be crazy. You lose the stream, you're out of the race. But in this context, they didn't ship any water, and we shipped a lot of water. We ended up losing the race to a boat that was by no means favourites. It turned out afterwards that we had 2 guys on board with chicken pox. We'd scrambled a bit in the preceding few weeks. That was pretty painful for me because I had a lot of responsibility. I felt on my shoulders and expectation, and it would have been a second Cambridge win on the trot, and I'd been used to winning, and suddenly had this devastating loss. Worse than that, though, was that Topolsky wrote a book called True Blue about this, which came out a bit later and kind of brought the whole thing back. And then I remember a few years after that, I was running along in Putney along the river, and I saw a bunch of film crews, and they were making the movie of the book. And some of my friends were extras in the cruise, and they said, "Oh, Matt, come on, you can relive that race." I politely declined. So it was the one that wouldn't die. And I raced 3 times to Cambridge, and when we lost every time, and it was very, very painful. It's a very brutal race to be in, and to race and to lose.
What sort of mentality do you need to cope with that, or does losing and having to be with it create the mentality? I mean, how do you see that?
So how I dealt with it, I think, was it just gave me huge determination. And so my final year, the 3rd year, I was president. So you get elected by the athletes, and then you have this person whose job it is to win the race that year. And basically the kind of constitution of the club at the time was basically you are all powerful. You select the crew, you can choose the coaches. We had some sponsorship and TV money. You're in charge of the budget as well. And I'd observed in the 2 years previously, we hadn't had a system anything like I'd seen at school, of a consistent vision. We had Alan Innes, who was wonderful, but he was working full time, and he was our chief coach. We had a bunch of old blues and kind of coaches who might show up for a week or two. And it was nowhere near the quality experience, and no fault of any individual that I'd been used to. So I went out and convinced the club to appoint our first professional coach in the wonderful Mark Lees.
Yeah.
You were a fan of as well.
God bless him. Yeah.
God bless him and rest his soul. Yeah. And he'd been a professional coach at Nottingham County, had huge success with the lightweights, and he'd been at London University, had huge success there. And I just thought he taught people to row and move the boat. So I bet on him in my last year. And we didn't have the talent, but each year we got closer. But after I'd done that, I'd committed to this contract with Mark. And so I bound the next year's president. So the committee of elders that sort of was there to supervise the club. So, well, you need to take responsibility for this. So we're going to make you chairman of the club. And I said, okay, well, I'll be chairman of the club, and I'll stay on after being a student. I'll stay on until we've won 2 successive boat races. So that's where sort of go back to the Steve Gunn experience, that idea of a system that can deliver performance year on year. I felt like you can't win one, because I'd seen that. You actually have to have a system with different athletes and people that could continue that success. And I'm very pleased to say that I did, and not that I was personally responsible, but we really built that system, and we ended up turning things around.
Why did it take until '93 for Cambridge to win another boat race then?
I think it takes time to build a system. I mean, I think that's, we'll see that with Oxford at the moment. You look at the record books, you get light blue followed by dark blue runs pretty consistently throughout. And I think you see this in other sports as well. You see this in international rowing too, I think. So it will take time to build a system. Actually, Mark suffered ill health and had to step down, and we went into different cycles of coaching, but also we were building our ability to ensure that when people applied to Cambridge, we knew that they were applying, and we knew that they were applying to the right college, because it's a weird system. And if you don't know, I want to apply to do an engineering course and I apply to the wrong college, you've got no hope, even though you might be a good candidate. So really basic stuff like that, and strength and conditioning and physios and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah. And then sort of, I guess, in between that, if that's the right way of putting it, you were part of Britain's Olympic team in the Seoul Olympics. What were your feelings about that? And how did the experience impact you?
I mean, until that point, rowing was something I was really proud of, but nobody really watched or knew about, apart from the boat race, which is obviously a personal disaster. But then being selected to be in the team was an enormous privilege. And I remember you actually, because I'd watched you with your, LA medal, hold it up and tell us. And there I was in the Olympic Village with you 4 years later. And, that was like a dream come true to be part of that effort. And you went round and told people that I was your little apprentice. And I felt very proud to be that. And I remain that to this day. And so that was an amazing experience. But the tough experience was I was in the spare pair. And
with Geoff, was it?
Yeah, with lovely Geoff Spencer-Jones. And it was great to be part of the team. But of course you want to be racing. And that was very frustrating. And, I had my disagreements about the approach to selection and the chief coach. I would never criticize the fairness of any coaching system, but happened to be the chief coach of the Oxford system and, whatever. So, a bit of sour grapes about not being in the boat, but I look back on it now, and that kind of experience is incredible, even if you are in the bottom end of the team.
Just outline. Thank you. Just outline for us this. I say it's an amazing result. I mean, perhaps it wasn't. Perhaps should have seen it coming. But I don't think when your 8 was put together, I saw it coming. But you had this Australian coach, Marty, I think.
Yeah.
And an 8 with a lot of people that were going to be really successful or had been successful, and an amazing bronze medal result. And the final, I think, is particularly memorable. Maybe you can talk about the final and talk a bit about that crew. And
yeah, so look, this is back in 1989 at Bled World Championships. In those days, the selection of the crews was very late. We went to Nottingham, I think, in probably June, July. We're selected as this sort of young 8. I think I was the only one. I'd been in the team the previous year and a not very successful 8. I think it's the only one who'd got a senior vest at that point. Maybe Richard Phelps as well. So a couple of us. And then Marty Aitken, the chief coach from the University of London, had a successful crew. But just like that Hampton crew, I just felt excited because I knew all those guys. I'd raced with most of them, and I knew they were great racers. And we had this trust and this energy. We had the Johnny Searle kind of belief, which I think was shared amongst us. We had the Johnny Holes kind of stroke man, racer you'd back every time. And so it was really exciting to be there. And I remember the preparation, we just got faster and faster and faster, and we were loving it. And we were also having fun, and we can come back to how important that aspect of supporting success is. And yeah, so we get to the final. In our heat, I remember we led the East Germans, who'd laughed at us when we arrived at the course, because two of the guys, Johnny and Rupert Oppolzer, had hair like Mick Hucknall, if anybody knows who he was. And they would point at us and say, "Oh, Simply Red is here, Simply Red," which is his band. So they were laughing at us, and they weren't laughing anymore at 1500 when we were leading them. They were laughing when we blew up just before the line. And so, yeah, in the final, we ended up, we had a race where the fastest 500 of any crew in the whole race, I think, was our third 500 or our fourth 500, where we just went absolutely crackers. And that was actually the way we raced, at Hampton. It's the way the Searles raced their race against the Avignale. We just had this incredible ability to kind of, lift a gear. And so it was one of those performances where we sort of really came through. It was a photo finish against the Americans, and we just took the bronze against them. So a really exciting finish. You'd always want, don't you, the better medal. But I think sneaking a bronze by a photo finish with the two Germanys in front wasn't a bad result for us.
Was it true that Adrian Ellison made the call in that race, go for the sports aid?
I don't recall that, Martin. Adrian was our cox, and your cox from 1984.
Yeah.
I think at that point, I was in the 4 seats. No, I was in the 2 seats. So I was just like whirring like crazy and not really hearing too much. I do remember Death or Glory being his.
Oh yeah, Death or Glory. Where did that?
Big,
Was that in the heat? That call?
I do you know, I can't remember, but it worked.
Yes.
Well, actually, in the heat, we opted for Death.
Yes.
As we blew up. In the final, hopefully, we opted for a bit more glory.
Talk to me about fun and its importance. I guess we can sort of make this wider, not just in rowing, but also in other avenues of life as well.
Yeah, look, I think in rowing, you know, at that level, then and now, you're making huge sacrifices. You're putting huge amounts of time into it, and particularly for those, and I spent a lot of time in subsequent years with people who really have been full-time athletes in the Caversham system or wherever. You know, and a good day and a bad day depend on your performances completely. It's very, very hard. And so I think one of the things I've learned over time, building teams in other places and trying to build sort of performance architecture or systems of performance around people, is the role of fun and being able to be yourself and being able to be vulnerable in these situations. I go back to our day, my day, I felt like, you know, it was a very serious system. It was really very brutal. The selection was complicated and, you know, non-transparent quite often.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of angst and anxiety that was unnecessary. And when I look at it now, I just think, you know, I wouldn't be an amazing rowing coach, but I could certainly look at a system and go, hang on, is this really set up for success? And I think, you know, you contrast, you know, the approach the Danes and the Dutch take to their elite rowing and the approach that we take. And I think there's room for people to be more rounded, even as they commit, you know, with similar intensity. So I think that's something that's, and I really felt that, you know, losing at Cambridge, you know, you were really in a system where we were trying to have fun, but it was really serious. And I think that's maybe some of the perspective that I would bring now if I had my time again.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm going to take you in a slightly different direction now, just because I want to talk about it before, and I don't want to forget it. But when you were in that role in Google, and I remember it because it was like, you know, it was the time where you were on the news, like the national news, like on one of the top slots. And so what made me think of it was, I'm thinking, well, this wasn't fun. Or then I'm thinking, oh, was it? You know, you were being interviewed by a select committee. It was
Yes.
to do with, you know, Google and paying taxes, and you had some quite strong personal attacks, I think, from that. I don't know if it was Margaret Hodge.
Yeah, so this goes back. I was running Google in the UK at the time, and there were rightly questions about how much tech companies were contributing to tax, and so I had to go to the Public Accounts Committee, and I went 2 or 3 times actually. I do think one of the challenges in our system is people running things should be accountable for stuff and should go and answer questions, but these committees are set up in a way that looks like a courtroom, but it's not a courtroom because you don't have the same rights to a say and seeing evidence beforehand. So there's a little bit of theatre, and great respect to Margaret Hodge, and she was the chair of one of them, and I went in front of other chairs as well. They run them tightly, and they've got their agenda in mind. But there was one where famously, I think I was asked in the first 2 minutes of the 3-hour hearing, I was asked 5 times, "What's your salary?" and or what you paid, and I politely declined to give that information because I thought it was irrelevant, and I knew it would be the headline if I said the number. And so I sort of said, "Look, I'm not going to get into that. I'm here to talk about attacks." So anyway, I ended up having to say multiple times. So the headline becomes, you know, Google boss doesn't know his pay. The point being, you know, these guys are out of touch and they should pay more taxes. So, and that kind of thing, you know, that kind of media experience. I'd say losing the boat race was worse.
Oh, right.
But I'd say you feel, firstly, you feel like an idiot because you're being portrayed as such. But secondly, you're trying to represent an entire organisation and do a good job. And I actually did a reasonable job through the hearings, and it's a complicated issue and so on. But you know, you have to be ready for these headlines, and it goes with the territory.
Yeah, you definitely earned your money on those days.
Well, if I knew what it was, I would have been happy to get it.
So we talked about this decision of yours to step back from international rowing, but it was kind of a decision to step back from the sport almost sort of completely. I mean, like, what did you do in terms of, you know, your fitness levels? Presumably you were building a personal life. You had some time for that.
Yeah. Yeah, look, I think, I mean, I've talked a lot to athletes subsequently who sort of thinking about their transition. It's very different now for top athletes because they've been, you know, well funded, and there's a whole bunch of sort of transition support they get, although not for very long financially. But for me, I think, you know, my agenda was, okay, I'm done. And actually what I wanted to do at the time, it may seem strange, was I wanted to avoid a foolish comeback. So I felt like I'd made a clear decision. I'd thought about it quite a lot. And I didn't want to, you know, a few months down the line be persuaded, hey, Matt, come on, we've got a seat in this boat, come and join us. So I deliberately sort of separated away, and I would go running and play tennis or badly or whatever, but I didn't do a lot of training. I actually met the woman who became my wife, Kate, around that time as well. So I had, you know, plenty of other things to do, sort of catching up on stuff I hadn't done before. So, but also, of course, you know, you go from, and lots of people have felt this, you go from being at the heart of a very tight group of people who you've got lots of time and love for, to not seeing them at all. You know, you can't be half in the national squad. And so that was a bit of a change. And so I sort of stepped away from rowing for quite a long time, built a career, went to business school, had a family, and then I was lucky enough to find, through the group that you and I connected in, a masters rowing group of, you know, ex-internationals and Henley winners. And I was enticed to join that when I'd reached the stage where, you know, my kids were old and I thought I could sneak off on a Saturday morning for a couple of hours. And so I rediscovered my joy for the sport, both through that and actually also through being asked to be a steward at Henley Regatta. And those two things have really reconnected me in the sport, which has been such a joy.
Yeah. So we'll talk about Henley in just a moment. Who enticed you?
Well, of course, my old friend Johnny Searle, because of his self-belief, and also Johnny has this great sort of bias towards people he knew were good in the day, even though I was kind of quite a lot of years out of the sport, and so he encouraged me to come down and have a row at Molesey, and as somebody actually who's no good at anything else, it was a joy to be back in the boat. And of course, you know, your erg splits can't be the same, and I've now been doing it for sort of 10 or 12 years as a masters rower. What you can do is rediscover everything about moving a boat and combining with each other, and all of those things that, you know, that make us successful when we're on the water, but also find the joy in it more. And I find that, you know, quite often it's about remembering how it should feel and how the combination should work. And so it's been wonderful to be back doing that. And I've just bought myself a sculling boat, and I've always been rubbish at sculling, partly so when I've got a bit more time, I'll be able to continue that sort of journey of discovery.
Yeah. Can you comment on the rumours that you've bought the sculling boat to go up against Ollie Zeidler in the Diamonds this year?
Well, he's amazing, isn't he? I was just watching a video of him training yesterday, so maybe I am. I think he's probably not got too much to worry about for me. What an amazing athlete. And we've had the joy of commentating together at Henley and seeing him go back to the Regatta year after year, and it's a great pleasure to see him there.
So Henley steward, I mean, what was that? Was that a call from Mike Sweeney? You're now a steward, Matt. I mean, what happens?
It was a call from Steve Redgrave, and he rang me. And, you know, I've sort of run into Steve over the years, and we were on the team together, so I know him. I would say we're good friends now. I wasn't a friend of his, but I knew him well enough that a call from him wouldn't be a crazy thing. And I was on a train, and he just said, I need to tell you two things, Matt. First, I've been elected chairman of the stewards, and second, you've been elected the steward. And I was literally blown away because, you know, I thought the stewards, I never really paid attention, but they were all the absolute greats of rowing. And I didn't know he was going to be chairman. I thought it was super exciting. And then I tried to understand, well, what does it actually mean? And it turns out, you know, you've got a full-time job for a week a year in perpetuity. And your job is to put on the world's best regatta. And what Steve was rightly doing, I think, was, you know, he was trying to diversify the skill set in the stewards. So when I got involved, he asked me, because I'd spent some time working in strategy and business, could I help the committee to think about a longer term plan for how the regatta might develop. And that has been a great joy for me. So I've not been on the committee, but I've been working closely with, that's a small group of stewards who really, define how the regatta runs. I've been involved in that. So that's, allowed us to do things like go to 6 days, add all these extra events, moving towards gender parity, bringing in the YouTube video broadcast coverage, bringing in partners. So I've been really, it's been an amazing privilege to be part of that sort of further development of this brilliant regatta.
Obviously, Steve is not the chair now. Richard Phelps is. Maybe you could say something about Steve's tenure as chair and where Steve left the regatta.
I mean, if you look at it, I came in the same year as him, as I say. So sort of, I think 2014, 2015 was the right year. So it's a 10-year tenure, which I think is a really good time actually to have a leader like that in place. And we went from 5 days, a small number of women's events at the elite end of the spectrum. We didn't have any commercial partners. There were plans to put broadcast live, but we haven't done it yet. And then you look at what's happened now. We've got a 6-day regatta that's really well established. I can't remember. Is it 8 new women's events we've brought in that 10-year period?
A lot.
And there's room now in the programme to actually get towards, genuine parity. There's some choices for the committee to make. The number of international entries has gone up and up and up. The number of entries has gone up and up and up. The number of people able to watch Henley and its racing has gone up and up and up. The regatta survived one cancellation and then moving to August the next year, and is now back in decent financial health. So I think if you look at, and I helped to sort of lay out some of what you'd call the metrics around what does success look like at the regatta. I think it was an amazing tenure. And the thing he did really well, I think, Martin, is took the essence of what makes the regatta special. It's a place where everyone wants to come and row. It's quintessentially English. It looks like it never changes. But he looked backwards and he saw that it changed hugely over the years, but it had that sense. And that's what he's been able to do, I think, is make it something that's both ancient and modern, where everybody wants to come and compete, and make it much more inclusive, both of women's rowing and hopefully many, many more countries and many, many more people. So I think he's handed it over in exceptional health.
Yeah, that's really nice of you to say so. What's your level of involvement with Henley now going forward?
I mean, so as a steward, your job is to genuinely, be that a steward of the regatta and make sure it's doing the right things. And you can be asked, and we have Richard Phelps and his committee in place. You can ask to do more to help there. So I stand ready to do what I'm asked to do. The thing that I alluded to earlier that I really enjoy is I'm one of the commentary team alongside yourself. I'm a small acorn to your oak tree of commentary. And we bring every race live to viewers around the world every year, and that's an absolute joy for me to be part of the team that's doing that. And the feedback we get, although the audiences aren't enormous, they're audiences are deep into the rowing. It's parents and families in Australia and Italy and Spain and South Africa and of course people in the UK. So that's one of the things I love doing and hope to continue to do for a while.
I have to say I do think your commentary is outstanding, Matt. And of course, your commentary is on, I think it's rowing's most watched YouTube video, which is it something like 250,000 views, or is it more? I'm trying to think of how many views.
Yeah, you're very kind to say that about me. Actually, it's the co-commentator, or in this case, it was Sarah Cook, I think, and me watching the St Paul's school record-breaking race back in 2018, was it?
Yeah.
And yeah, last time I looked last year, it had about 250,000 views. It's the regatta's most watched video, ahead of Mahi Drysdale being kind of coming back after being down, which is also another couple of 100,000 views.
Oh, so, right, yeah.
But one of the things we learned, and we talked about it on air, but viewers of this might not know, is top teams, the Kiwi 8, you and I commentated on the next year, I think, racing, had told us that they'd been watching that video. What great rowing looked like, and I think that's one of the great things. When I came back into doing a bit of rowing, I went online because obviously I'm a digital guy. It's like, where can I see great rowing? The answer was, well, in some shaky VHS tapes that somebody's uploaded. And then suddenly, if you go to the YouTube channel for Henley, you've got 10 years worth of brilliant racing that you can watch and trawl through. And one of my boys did rowing for a couple of years, and he used to avidly look at those videos to see what good looked like and see some great races and stuff. So it's a great joy to be part of that.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I think in terms of where you're looking to move, and there's a link in this. I do remember us having a conversation. It was probably about 10 years ago, or maybe longer, and I said, "Oh, what you been doing, Matt?" It was in the evening, and you said, "I'm just coming out of Sainsbury's," and I pictured you with 2 orange shopping bags, and I kind of said to you, "Oh, what have you bought?" And you said, "No, I'm on the board." And so I guess you have been involved, like more than just doing Google. So tell us about why you're involved with the things you're involved with outside of being the president of Google.
Yeah, so public companies need a board of non-execs who are not, part of the company but bring other experience. And so after a few years at Google, I was being approached by people who wanted somebody who had some experience of e-commerce and technology and stuff. And so, and oddly enough, my first job was as a paper boy, but my second job as a student was working in a warehouse stacking roll pallets for Sainsbury's, which is the kind of big crates that then get delivered to different supermarkets. And so I had a bit of an affinity for Sainsbury's, and so I joined the board. And you're part of the governance, but also trying to help coach and develop the team and so on. And it was a great privilege because I think it's a brilliant organisation. It's got hundreds of thousands of people, not paid very much, who have a big responsibilities we saw in COVID to help people live their lives better and give you great food and service every day. So I really enjoyed that. And at the end of 9 years, a bit like Steve's, tenure at the Regatta, there's governance, which means it's time to move on. And so I had to step down. And I've been on a couple of charity boards. And actually, I've just this week, The Guardian announced that I'm going to be joining their board. And I think, we alluded to this at the beginning. We're in an interesting moment for, facts and information and journalism. So I'm delighted to hope to bring some of my experience to help that organisation put technology to work for good and play its role in the years to come.
Yeah, I saw that, and I thought that was a really good fit. So, are you allowed to say how much did they want you, or how much did you say I'd be interested?
I'm not going to go into that, but I think it is an organisation. Look, as I said when I kind of was asked to join, it's an organisation I followed for years as a reader, but actually also in 18 years at Google, and the first 5 I was running the UK. One of the things I did was stay really close to news publishing because I've got, I'd worked actually for a couple of years for Trinity Mirror. Oddly enough, the Daily Mirror you mentioned earlier.
Oh, yeah.
My picture was not in the picture library. I don't know where they put it. But so, I had this long experience of working with press and news organisations, which I kept going. I launched the Google News Initiative when I was here, which is helping train journalists and help with technology and innovation. So long been close to many news organisations. So when they asked me if I'd be interested, I said no. And then when I'd announced I was stepping down, it was not possible. I didn't think it was compatible with my job. When I announced I was stepping down, it was possible for me to join. So delighted to do that.
I don't know if this is the sort of thing you feel that you can talk to or not. You might just bat it away. But obviously, in terms of the challenges of news, now you're going to be involved with the Media News Group. Facebook announced that they were stopping fact checking as something, and it seems that a lot of big tech are very close or want to be close to. I guess he's the president of the USA by now, Donald Trump. What are the challenges or dangers for an organisation like yours?
It's a whole other podcast and probably a podcast series, Martin.
Yeah.
But I mean, look, in short, everyone being connected has been a huge bonus in terms of access to information, education, communications for people. And, you only have to go to Kenya or Nigeria, as I was a couple of months ago, and see how lives change for the better when they get that access. We've seen in recent years, though, particularly with the rise of social media, the concerns around disinformation and misinformation. And now on top of that, you've got AI and the worry that deep fakes can be generated by everyone. So, you know, Hollywood level, you know, production can be in the hands of anyone who wants to kind of misinform people. So there's a real battle out there on how this technology is used. And that ranges from cybersecurity and the election interference to the different standards of different social platforms. So I think we're at a really critical time. It isn't, however, all doom and gloom. I mean, people are more informed than ever before. And, you know, people are smarter than just going to kind of one source. So if it's something important, they will research. And one of the great responsibilities at Google is Google Search is one of the ways people come and check what's going on. They can see multiple different facts. So I think we're at an interesting time. That's why I'm joining the Guardian's board, because I think it's a really important time for high quality journalism, news and information that people can trust. But there's a real battle for truth going on in the world. And, you know, it's going to roll for some time.
Yeah. Well said. One of the things I was going to ask you, which I had in my mind, which has just popped back in there, we were talking about teams and how passionate you are about creating teams and the systems within which teams thrive. And I guess this is a bit of an artificial question, because it's not a straightforward answer. But I'm going to ask you, what is the best team that you've been involved with, and why? And you can bat it away or do whatever you want with it. But
like, it's hard. I think it's hard to compare across different disciplines. I'd say if I go back, probably for me that sort of school crew 2 years of sort of successes was such a formative time, and it had never been done before either, and it was a kind of bunch of misfits. So I think that probably and I was 15, 16, you know, 17. So that probably remains a high point. But I think also lots of teams, you know, and this is one of the things I was going to mention, you know, our friend Kath Bishop, Dr. Kath Bishop, who's written the book, The Long Win. Yeah. I really think it's worth a read if people are interested in sort of how we think about performance. And, you know, the headline idea there is that, you know, trying to win every performance, every outing, every session, get a PB on the ergo, whatever, isn't the way to be long-term successful. Actually, finding a way to enjoy the journey, be consistent, managing the things you can manage and build over time, and define your success as personal growth. And I think that really resonates with me. So when I think about teams that I built, might be, you know, internally within Google, or teams I've been able to be a part of, for example, even that little group of stewards, or between Google and our customers and partners, or in the charity boards, I'm always looking to find a way to bring people together around some kind of vision of what's possible, and then help them to perform. That's the thing that gives me real pleasure. And so I wouldn't pick, you know, beyond that, anyone in particular, but those are the characteristics, like coming together with a group with a vision of what you want to do, and then knocking it out of the park together. That's such a great thing to be able to do in life.
I know you were training on Saturday. I'm going to ask you if you've trained today.
I had a bit of a stomach upset, so I backed off. But I've realised, you know, and this is something that maybe we'll come back to. There's a lot of people participating rowing at later stages in life, and one of the joyful things I was part of is during the pandemic, Zoom ergos online, where we were hosting. It was like a low rent Peloton. Well, it was free, and you could join and live do an ergo with an instructor of your choice. And on Peloton, they were all sort of super hot people, and on Zoom ergos, it was sweaty 50-year-olds in their garages. And you know, I love doing I love doing that. I can't remember why I'm telling you this story now.
Because I asked you if you trained today, and you said no, but because you're.
But no, so this is the tangent I was going into.
Oh yeah.
What I'd like to do actually is explore a bit like what's the right regime for kind of masters training in rowing, and for people who are working and have got those different pressures on them. And I think one of the things I noticed with myself and our group is we tend to have a mixture of stuff we used to do and stuff we've kind of tried to figure out, but actually there's probably a bit more of a scientific approach to it. I think there's a lot of people out there. One of the great joys of competing, as I've done at the head of the Charles, which is a great event, is the number of people coming, and the standard in these masters categories just goes up and up and up. So I think that's another podcast series for the future.
Yeah. How much can you share with anybody where you're up to on the erg now? What sort of stuff you do, and what sort of scores you're putting down?
I mean, gosh, I think during the pandemic, I did 5K in just over 17 minutes, about 17:04,
Ooh,
like that.
yeah, pretty
But that
decent.
was on the road perfect, and there's some debate about how good that is.
Yeah.
That would be a good score. I mean, I think, I'm at the stage now where if I can compete with sort of the top end international women, then I'll be pretty happy. And so there is a bit of an adjustment. And I mean, I'm not dissing women on that in any ways. They're amazing athletes, really amazing. But there is this kind of how you calibrate yourself to things, and that's, I think, part of that journey. Part of the Kath Bishop long win is not assessing yourself against what you used to do, but assessing yourself against the progress that you're making over time yourself. And I still fight those demons every day. I can see a score in front of me that I don't like.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, it's something doing the ergometer, and as you age and trying to work out what is a good score now, which is isn't as good as something you did a couple of years ago.
Yeah, and so I think if you're an older athlete, read Kath's book, and I think I'm trying to think about, right, what's the mix of stuff that will give me the combination of competition, camaraderie, fitness, all those things. I joke that the group that we row with, Martin, is a sort of a self-help group for middle-aged people disguised as a rowing team, and it's not too far from the truth, actually, because what you're doing is you're looking after each other, you're taking care of each other. There's always somebody struggling. There's always somebody who can give you a bit of advice. And if in doubt, you can always take refuge in the past and the conversation about how good we used to be.
So I think finally, because we've been talking for over an hour now, what are you looking forward to this year and why?
Well, I've stepped down from my job, but I've not retired, and so I'm actually trying to have a 39-year delayed gap year. So, so one of my challenges was, went straight through school, university, always rowing, and then working and rowing, and I've never stopped. And so I'm in the lucky position to be able to take a bit of time out. So I'm starting to plan. I'm actually going off with Gillian Lindsay, who's running amazing camps. So my first thing is I'm off to Sabaudia in Italy with a bunch of masters rowers with my new sculling boat to try to get some confidence in the single. And then I'm going to be doing a bit of traveling and a bit of reading and just decompression. And then I'll aim to dial up a bit the things I do. Probably some of them will be around technology and how we harness it for good. And we'll see where those things are.
Wow, that's so exciting. Is there anything we haven't talked about that would be good to mention?
Everything else is classified. No, look, just to say, Martin, I really love this series, and it's fantastic that you do it. And working with you at Henley and learning from you, actually, whether it's in the boat or on the microphone, has been a real privilege. And I know these conversations bring a lot of joy to a lot of people. So thank you for what you do as well.
That's brilliant. So we'll end the live part of this conversation here, I think. Matt Brittin, thank you ever so much.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.